Speaker, I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to prohibit the export of live farmed animals for slaughter or fattening and for connected purposes. Mr. Speaker, the export of live farm animals can cause immense and unnecessary suffering to many of the animals involved. There is evidence that public concern on this issue dates back as far as the 1950s, and even further back in the particular case of export of horses. And indeed, I'm sure many in this chamber will remember the mass protests which featured on our TV screens during the 1990s. The key objection to live export of animals for slaughter is essentially twofold. Firstly, some countries in Europe have far weaker rules on animal welfare than we do. Secondly, there's a real risk that the rules on transport and slaughter of animals, which are supposed to apply across the EU, will not be effectively enforced once the animals leave our shores. Figures from the Animal and Plant Health Agency show that around 40,000 sheep are exported from Britain for slaughter on the continent every year. The long journeys are stressful for the animals, and in some cases they can result in suffering caused by overcrowding, high summer temperatures and animals sustaining injuries en route. Many of these 40,000 sheep are sent to France. Regular film reports by the organisation L214 have revealed inhumane and illegal slaughter practices in French slaughterhouses. In one shocking case, a slaughterman is seen stabbing a knife into the eye of a conscious sheep. A report in 2016 by the Committee of Inquiry of the French Assemblée Nationale confirms that there are serious welfare problems in French abattoirs. And, Mr. Speaker, in my view and in the view of many of my constituents, it's not acceptable for the UK to send animals to die in such horrendous conditions. Around 20,000 calves were exported from Northern Ireland to Spain in 2016 and 3,000 from Scotland to Spain. As regards the Scotland exports, the animals are first shipped to Northern Ireland, then they're taken by road to the Republic of Ireland, from where they are sent on a 20-hour sea journey to northern France. Finally, they are driven all the way through France to Spain. Scientific research indicates that young calves are not well adapted to cope with such lengthy journeys. Their immune systems are not fully developed, and their body's capacity to control their internal temperature is also limited. That makes them particularly susceptible to both heat and cold stress. Morbidity and mortality following transport can therefore be high, Mr. Speaker. And of course, once in Spain, it's entirely permissible for calves to be reared in barren conditions without bedding, and keeping animals in these conditions would be illegal in the United Kingdom, where we apply tougher rules than the EU minimum. And turning to some of the mechanics of the bill, it's drafted to cover all parts of the United Kingdom. Animal welfare is devolved, but exports are a trade issue and therefore a reserved matter. Whilst the bill would not cover exports for either, whilst the bill would cover and ban exports for either slaughter or fattening, it would not prohibit the export of animals for breeding. Because of their higher value, breeding animals are generally transported in better conditions, and so that this business does not give rise to the same concerns regarding animal welfare. Because it only deals with exports, the bill would not prevent the transport of animals from the Scottish Islands to the mainland. An exception is also included in the bill to allow cross-border export of live animals from Northern Ireland to the Republic of Ireland to continue. This is essentially a local trade, and I've seen no evidence to indicate the journeys are excessively long. However, the exception is framed to try to ensure that the Republic of Ireland cannot be used as a backdoor route to continued live exports from the UK to mainland Europe. Mr. Speaker, the fear has been expressed that if a ban were to be brought forward, there's a risk of challenge under the rules of the World Trade Organization. But WTO rules provide for certain clear exceptions to their general prohibition on trade restrictions, one of which covers public morals. The WTO appellate body has ruled that animal welfare matters are capable of falling within the public morals exception. For example, the US ban on the import of cat and dog fur and the EU ban on seal fur remain in place despite both being members of the World Trade Organisations. There are good grounds to believe, therefore, that the UK would be able to defend a WTO challenge if it were to be made by showing that the export ban proposed in this bill would be a proportionate response to deeply held concerns by many in the public in the UK with strong opposition to live exports dating back around half a century. Indeed, only recently the RSPCA delivered a petition with over 1 million signatures to the European Commission expressing grave concern about the suffering caused by poor enforcement of rules on long-distance transport of animals. Signatures came from many countries around Europe. Over the years, there have been repeated calls for this harsh trade to be brought to an end. I first got involved in this issue some 18 years ago when I was a member of the European Parliament. But all attempts to ban this trade have so far failed. They failed, Mr. Speaker, because a ban would contravene EU law. In 1992, the Conservative government, then in power, sought to restrict live exports and refuse licences to export sheep to Spain. Their decision was overturned by the European Court of Justice on the grounds that it would breach EU rules on the free movement of goods. Now that the UK has voted to leave the European Union, we have the opportunity to make the decision here, in this House, on whether to allow or prohibit the export of live farmed animals. But that will only be the case if we leave the customs union and the single market. If we do not, we'll remain subject to the restrictions that make such a ban impossible today, and that provides a further important reason to respect the result of the referendum and create a new partnership with our European neighbours outside the customs union and the single market. The case for a ban has been made clearly by a wide-ranging coalition of animal welfare organisations, including Compassion in World Farming, the RSPCA, the Conservative Animal Welfare Foundation and World Horse Welfare. The Conservative manifesto states, I quote, "As we leave the European Union, we can take early steps to control the export of live farm animals for slaughter." This bill, Mr. Speaker, provides the government with an opportunity to do exactly that. But we need to deal not just with the slaughter trade, but also the export of calves for fattening, which can also lead to serious and unnecessary suffering. Nor, Mr. Speaker, should we just control the trade, we should end it. Nor should we wait until the UK leaves the EU to take action. We should put a prohibition on live export on the statute book now to come into effect on exit day as soon as the United Kingdom leaves the European Union. Mr. Speaker, the time has come to end this inhumane, cruel and unnecessary trade which has no legitimate part to play in modern farming. Export should take place on the hook, not the hoof, and I commend this bill to the House.
Thank you. The question is that the right honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As many as are that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare and bring in the bill?
Zach Goldsmith, Craig McKinley, Richard Graham, Henry Smith, Caroline Lucas, Angela Smith, Kelvin Hopkins, Sir Roger Gale, Kate Hoey and myself, sir.
Mrs. Theresa Villiers.
Live Animal Exports Prohibition Bill.
Second reading what day?
2nd of February.
2nd of February 2018. Thank you. We come now to the